Hola.
Hola, buenas. ¿Nos escucháis bien? Sí. Bueno, primero os pido otro aplauso para Neil Marshall, que es flamante, máquina del temps, merecidísima de este año. Y segundo, antes de empezar, me gustaría preguntaros si que necesitáis que haya traducción constantemente o preferís que la hagamos en inglés para que haya más preguntas. Es lo que vosotros me digáis. ¿Qué preferís? ¿En inglés? ¿Está ok? Vale. Perfecta. Pues we will do the interview in English only. Okay? And I please you forgive me for my English, but you will understand me. Don't worry. But maybe it's not too great. Okay?
Okay.
Yes, y cualquier cosa que tenga una duda, pues te pido a ti, ¿vale? The first question is about, I always make this question to the horror icons I interview. Is what movie or what movies, when you saw as a teenager, makes you to go to a horror director or a genre director? What was that movies that inspired you?
My earliest recollection of anything to do with horror, I think I was around, I must have been about age 5 maybe, that I remember my dad waking me up and saying that there was something on the television that I needed to see, and taking me through to the living room where the television was, and I believe it was The Bride of Frankenstein, and I just sat down and was just completely, enraptured by this. I had no understanding of it whatsoever. This beautiful black and white film, and just sat there, just like wide-eyed, as a child, thinking that, being terrified and entranced, and I think that definitely got under my skin, and from then on I certainly became very quickly obsessed with Universal monsters, Frankenstein and the Wolfman and things like that, and certainly the Wolfman got under my skin quite a bit. And then later on, not much later on, I guess it was the 80s, and I was 10 in 1980, so like the 80s were absolutely my kind of informative years, and the combination of like the arrival of VHS tapes and access to films that we never had before, and then getting to see things. You go into a video shop in the early 80s, and these places were like amazing back then, and literally all they had was either horror or porn. And so that was kind of it. And all the horror covers were like amazing stuff. And so I started watching as much horror as I could then. And I got into American Werewolf and The Howling, and I finally got to see like Jaws and
you
Alien.
rented the video nasties too, in a way, they were
they
were forbidden, but do you get them?
We managed to see some of the video nasties before they were banned, but then afterwards, like throughout the rest of the 80s, and I don't know, I'm sure you all have heard about the video nasties, yes. But then it became like this kind of currency, like to get hold of one of these films and get hold of a copy. And you'd get like third-generation copies of Texas Chainsaw Massacre that was like really bad VHS, and they'd have like sort of Hebrew subtitles on or something really bizarre like that. And getting these things and like you pass them around like it was like this little secret between you, and it was great. It was great. I got to to see all these films, and they certainly they got under my skin then. I know horror was in me.
And how was your road to make your first feature, Dog Soldiers? Was hard?
Yes.
To get, because I wanna tell you something. In 2002, this new extremity of French directors or even Rob Zombie, they haven't released their movies, and you were the first one to make this new horror that was very, very gory, very, very frontal, before all this explosion. I think you are like a pioneer in the 2000s.
Oh, well, I've been a pioneer.
Yes, you are.
No, it was very, very difficult. It took 6 years from the original kind of conception of the film to actually being on set making it was 6 years, and a lot of drafts of the script. And because I was in the UK at the time, and there really wasn't any horror films being made in the UK. The only exception being Danny Boyle was doing 28 Days Later, around a similar kind of time. And that's the only one that I can think of anyway. But yeah, so all the different establishments, the potential money, the potential producers and everything, the response I was getting was, we don't do that kind of film here. There was a real snobbish attitude toward it, looking down their noses at horror and saying it's not our cup of tea. And we make period films and we make romantic comedies, and that's what we do in the UK. And also the other response I got was like, it's way too ambitious for a first feature. Like, there's no way, you want to do werewolves, you want to do action, for a first-time feature director, it's too ambitious. So we were rejected by everybody over a long period of time, and then slowly but surely started to get some traction that we brought on board Christopher Figg as a producer, who at that time he'd made Hellraiser back in the 80s, so he had a track record with horror there, and then he got us in touch with the Luxembourg Film Fund, and then we finally found our funding from an Arkansas spinach magnate. Yeah, a guy from Arkansas who'd made his fortune selling canned spinach, but he also had a passion for horror films and always wanted to make a werewolf movie. And I think it was, I don't know when it was, 5-6 years later, that we were at the American film market. We had a script and we had a little maquette of a werewolf, and he saw it and he said, "What is that?" and ended up essentially financing the whole film. So a real lifesaver there. And then we were off and running.
And was it difficult shooting because all of that, all the special effects, action?
Oh yeah.
Maybe a little bit a nightmare, no?
Well, in a way, any other filmmaker who's done this kind of things will know this. You kind of make your own problems, which is I was insisting on doing practical werewolves. That was the only way to go. And then they had the idea that, let's have them 7 foot tall. How are we going to do that? We're going to put them on stilts. And then how are they going to see? Oh, they can't see. And so, you've got guys on stilts who can't see, staggering around a set. And I hired a group of dancers. There's several dancers. Rather than stunt guys, I got dancers because I wanted some kind of elegance to the movement of the werewolves. That all went out the window when you put them on stilts. So, when they're literally staggering and falling all over the set and things like that. And yeah, I made my own problems.
And what was the
But we got there.
Yes.
We got something.
And when you called the dancers and you say, you have to do a werewolf, what was his impression of the dancers? Okay, we'll do werewolves.
Yeah, I think if they knew what they were getting into, they probably would have said no. But at the time, it was very exciting for them, so it's like something different for them to do, yeah.
And now we have to talk, I think, of one of our all-time favorites of the people are here, that is the Descent. That I think it's like one of your big masterpieces, and was another shooting that was not very easy to do.
No, it brought its own set of problems. For those who know the film, there isn't a single real cave in the whole movie. It's a combination of sets and some miniatures and a couple of matte paintings. But we all went caving, myself and the cast. We went caving before we shot the movie, and very quickly realized that if we'd done it in a real cave, we probably would have died. It's like the caves that we were looking at, they're so dangerous. And also we needed the cave to fit the story that we'd written. There's very specific things, so we ended up having to build it. But we built these sets at Pinewood, and we shot the film in January, and whatever soundstage that we were on had no heating at all, so it was freezing cold. And of course, you see the movie, everything's soaking wet all the time, so the cast spent their time just being showered rain and water and in pools and stuff like that were icy cold. And so between takes, we had to get them out and wrap them in thermal blankets and stuff like that before they got hypothermia. But despite all that, they loved the experience. So.
And do you like these kind of shootings? that are
Punishing my
ambitious.
actors.
Yes, like Sam Raimi with Bruce Campbell, that love to do bad
Yeah.
things to Bruce.
Yeah.
Do you enjoy that?
I think there's a slight sadistic edge there to like just putting your actors through hell. It's all right. They get you back in different kind of ways.
Yes. And when we were talking after beginning the interview before, we're talking about the idea of the B movie, And I think your first two movies, Dog Soldiers and The Descent, are very good B horror movies that nowadays they are totally disappear. What is the thing that likes you more about this kind of B horror movies?
Well, it almost feels like it's a sort of lost genre in a way. Like a lot of yesterday's B movies are what are now today's A movies. That you wouldn't have thought that long ago that superhero movies or whatever would be the big A movies. But I love that kind of genre of like really, really good B movies. It's just like a lot of my favorite movies are what you'd categorize as B movies. Just great genre films that are very knowing, very self-aware, and just there to entertain. Just purely there to entertain. And I love that kind of stuff.
And what do you think they don't make it like this anymore? Because all the B movies are. Because when you see a lot of blockbusters, they have this kind of vibe of B movies. It's like it's for this that B movies are not.
Well, I think you used a great example before of that film, the movie Deep Rising, which is like that's a classic B movie, but it was given enough of a budget to do it well, but not to take it to ridiculous extremes, or something else like The Hitcher or something like that, which is one of my favorite movies. It's just a brilliant film. I completely lost what the hell was I talking about?
We're talking about B movies because they are not made anymore like this.
Well, no, it's to do with the budget levels. That's what it's to do with. It's that there was like kind of a mid-budget level that being made movies that isn't getting made anymore. It's like everybody's we're down in the independents, like struggling for finance, or they're up in the studio tentpole movies, and a lot of that kind of mid-range has now kind of gone into the sort of television space, but not necessarily as movies, but more as like TV series, sort of like Stranger Things or something like that. But so it feels like it's a little bit of a lost art.
Yes.
Yeah.
But you are continuing to do it.
I'll fight the good fight.
You have to continue to do it because you are one of the last ones.
No, I'll continue to try and do this kind of stuff. Absolutely, I love it. It's because it's the films that I want to go and see. So someone's going to make them.
So let's talk right now of another, I think, favorite of all of the people who are here. That it's Doomsday. You have talked about the video era. That you go to the video store and you see a lot of genre movies, exploitation movies, Italian movies making rip-offs of Escape from New York or Mad Max. And when I saw the first time Doomsday, I think this is the perfect movie for the video store of the 80s because every 20 minutes it changes. It goes from a punk Mad Max style to a castle with medieval. It's so crazy. And I was thinking this is a movie that only can be made by a guy who has lived the video era,
Yeah, Doomsday was absolutely my love letter to the 80s and the video age, and you hit the nail on the head. And I look back on it now, and I still can't believe that actually somebody gave me some money to make that.
And it's expensive, no? It's a little bit expensive.
It was $28 million, so that kind of fell into that kind of mid-range thing now. But at the time, it was like amazing. It was huge money, And yeah, to do that and get to throw in medieval stuff and post-apocalyptic stuff, it was like it was a love letter to the 80s. And anybody who grew up and experienced the 80s through cinema like I did is like I don't know if we appreciate just how much we were spoiled, and I know that there's a movie here about 1982 as like one of the greatest years, and it was, but all the years around it, the films that were coming out at that time, and they were all like original stuff for the most part. There weren't sequels or remakes; they were like original films, and defined genre cinema from then on, I think. So therefore, when I got to make Doomsday, it was like I wanted to throw in a whole bunch of stuff. I had this image that popped into my head very early on of a futuristic soldier facing off with a medieval knight. And how could I make that happen in a movie that didn't involve time travel? Because I didn't want to do time travel. And slowly but surely that kind of emerged as Doomsday, as this future history thing. Yeah.
So one major influence in Doomsday is John Carpenter, obviously, because all the first minutes are like Escape from New York.
Yeah.
That is great. And in your new movie, The Lair, the one thing I love very, very much is that the typography you use is the John Carpenter typography of a John Carpenter's film. This means that you are a big fan of John Carpenter. Is one of your favorite directors?
Yeah, no, John Carpenter, absolute legend, definitely one of my favorite directors of all time. And and his ability as well to jump from Halloween to Escape from New York, The Thing, Big Trouble in Little China, massively inspirational. And yeah, I ripped off his font. Because it was that thing, it was the John Carpenter font. I mean,
he rips off too. In all the interviews he say about what movies of the 60s and the 50s,
But so I got hold of, I used it on The Descent first, and then on Doomsday, not on Centurion, but then I used it again on The Lair. It was like it kind of, the audience will know. Anybody who knows knows, and so it's just that wink to the audience to say, I love John Carpenter's movies. What can I tell you?
Mm-hmm. And let's talk now about your adventures in television. How was for you to make this change, to go from movies to television that is all very, very estructurado? Structured,
Yeah.
You have a time, how was your experience there?
Well, it was great, and I think actually coming from sort of doing low-budget films helped me in that world, because you're used to doing things, fast, especially working really fast, which is what we needed to do in TV. But what I loved about the television experiences were the ability, because if you're doing a feature film, you're kind of like devoting, a year or more of your life to this project of yours, and you live, you breathe, you eat, you sleep this thing. But with the TV projects, you park your ego at the door because you're mostly going in to essentially work on somebody else's baby. It's somebody else's project. And you park your ego at the door and you go in and you do the best job you possibly can. But then once you've finished shooting it, you get a few days in the edit and then you're done. You never see it again until it's broadcast. And there's some kind of, it's quite cathartic that it's just like you go in, you direct the shit out of it, and then you leave. And
a good check too.
Yeah, well, that's nice. They've got more money in television. That's good. But you also get to do maybe 4 projects a year. And between those projects, I could be jumping between doing like Westworld and then Constantine and then Hannibal and jumping like genres all the time, which is, I never thought I'd get to do a Western. So, and I got to work with Anthony Hopkins in Westworld. Like, wow, never thought I'd get to do that. And then, do Lost in Space, sort of going into science fiction. And then, so it was just a real pleasure to sort of bounce around and do kind of projects that I might not normally do. In terms of fitting into a structure, it's really quite easy for the most part. Game of Thrones, you know what you're getting into, and you might try something slightly different. Like in the second episode that I did, The Watchers on the Wall, when we killed off one of the major characters, during the battle, I wanted to do a slow motion shot. And they said, well, we don't do slow motion on Game of Thrones. Like, we just don't do that. So I said, well, let me do it because I think it's necessary for this shot. And it was the shot of Jon Snow cradling Ygritte in his arms as she dies, and behind him there's like a battle raging. Mm-hmm. And I said, in order for this to have the impact that you want it to have, we need to separate him this moment from the background, and so do it in slow mo. And they did it anyway. And at the end of it, they said it was their favorite shot in the whole episode. Like, they were so glad that they did it. So they were open to those kind of ideas. Whereas when I went in to do Hannibal, they had a very, very strict set of rules that you had to follow. Like, everything was at Hannibal speed. And the DP said, everything must always be backlit. We always have to be on the dark side of everything. And I wanted to do like a fast tracking movement over there. And they said, no, you can't do that. We don't do that. It has to go at Hannibal speed, which is like really slow. Hannibal speed was slow. And that was the whole show. That was the nature of the show. So once you accept that, it's kind of like, okay, fine, we'll do it that way instead. It's like, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it.
And what's your favorite experience in television?
Probably Game of Thrones, I think. Just to be a part of something that was so much a part of the zeitgeist, was so, it's so cultural, and to be involved in it, and 2 episodes that I'm really, really proud of, 2 of the biggest battle episodes, at a time when it was like at its maximum sort of popularity, was like astonishing. So, yeah. That was a great experience.
You're the first director to put in a movie and in a series the Valerian Fire.
Yes.
Yes?
Yeah.
It's a very high honor.
It was a big honor. But, yeah.
You were asking for the producers, I more Valerian Fire, more explosions or not?
Always.
Always.
Always. So more fire, more explosions, more blood. Yeah, that's the usual request. And anybody, Daniel can testify to this, anybody who's worked with me, the most common thing that I will say on set, on any film, more blood.
More blood.
Yeah.
A truly horror director. And
it's never enough, because I did a pilot for a TV show, which sadly it never saw the light of day, but we shot it in Toronto, and it never got picked up. But we did a scene that there had been a big explosion when people were being wheeled out of the explosion on these being taken to the ambulances, and some of them were missing legs and things like that, and it was pretty grim. But the makeup department had gone in with these little blood things, and they were like, doing something like that. And I said, we need more, to the point at which I literally just grabbed this big bucket and went in and just started pouring it everywhere. I think there's photographs of me somewhere doing that. It's like pouring blood over everywhere. I was like, now that looks realistic. That looks what we want. But yeah, so.
And you were talking about the blood. What do you think about this issue and discussion about this clash between practical effects and CGI in horror movies? I mean, what is your opinion about a horror movie have to have always more practical than CGI? What do you think about this?
I think practical all the way, in wherever possible. CGI serves a wonderful purpose, but if it's overused, weirdly it dates quite quickly.
Yes, very bad, very bad. Deep Rising too. Deep Rising. Nowadays, the awful thing is the CGI. The movie is excellent, but the CGI has aged very bad.
Every so often something comes along that doesn't, but that takes a lot of time and effort and creativity. But I just think of the films that I love the most. Be it Alien, be it American Werewolf in London, or The Howling, or The Thing, or Predator, and it's all practical stuff, and it looks as good now as it did then, and I just say practical all the way.
But practical means more time, and the problem now is that producers, when you say, I want to do practical, all the producers, it's difficult for you to...
It's always hard to convince people about it, but it's like once you have your creature, or whatever it is, your practical effect, that the ability to just change the angle, shoot it here, shoot it there, change the lighting, add this, add that. Or you might get happy mistakes that happen that feel very organic. You get all of that. Whereas if it's CG, it's so controlled. You have to shoot this, shoot that. We have to, and then it's kind of locked in, and you're kind of stuck to this rhythm. I love the happy accidents that you get through practical effects.
And let's talk about a movie. I think it was problematic, that it's Hellboy. But I have to tell you that the director of the festival, Angel Sala, and me are very fans, because I think it's one of the, even though the problems, it's one of the craziest superhero movies ever made, with that monsters at the end, the gore. I know what is your recall now of that experience that maybe was a little bit not very happy.
Well, what can you say? Well, I signed on to do a horror version of Hellboy, and I wasn't allowed to do a horror version of Hellboy. And then, basically, the producers basically exerted complete control over the project, which made my life fairly miserable. Mm-hmm. And I look back on it now and think, I basically signed on for the wrong reasons. I hadn't made a feature film in 9 years. I was desperate to get back into the feature world, and somebody was presenting me with this Hellboy, which seemed like a really great option. And it was the biggest budget I'd ever had up to that point. So I jumped at the chance and neglected to sort of realize at the time that the script wasn't very good. And it wasn't ever going to get much better. So it was that thing of, you can only do so much. It all comes down to the script, really. And I spoke to Frank Darabont afterwards, and he was just saying, that's the bottom line. It's like, if the script's no good, don't do it. End of story. There's no hesitation there. Mm-hmm. And I made that mistake of trying to do something where the script wasn't really that good. And I think it's a bit of a convoluted mess. I really do.
But it's very funny. And these monsters that appear in the end, like Hellraiser monsters, eating people. This is Neil Marshall, no? Very Neil Marshall.
Well, no. Weirdly, the intention of the producers was to make a more kind of adult-oriented Hellboy. But I think rather than going for smarter ideas, they just went for more blood. And it's not practical blood; it's a lot of CGI blood.
Yes, it's CGI a lot.
And weirdly, it seems strange for me to say this, but that wasn't my idea. That was all done afterwards, and it's kind of like all that CG blood and stuff like that. I don't like the look of it. I think it looks fake. But all that said, I love that you love it. I love that everybody else. If people find something in it, great. I can't claim any real authorship over that film.
Mm-hmm. And now, after this experience of Hellboy, you have returned to your roots. And 20 years after Dog Soldiers, you make The Lair. I think it's an homage, to Dog Soldiers. It's it closes the circle, no? I think it's what is the most thing appealing to you of this new era of you, that you are totally independent, like The Reckoning, and you are totally free. What do you feel now about this?
Well, it was a lesson that I learned from the Hellboy experience, really, of you can have all the money in the world, but if you have no creative control or creative authority over the work you're creating, and you're going to, it's your name that's going to be up there, and you're the one who's going to get the blame if it goes wrong.
Yes.
Then I'd rather have the control than the big budget. At the end of the day, it's sure, it's nice to have the money, absolutely, but just artistically and creatively satisfying just to make the films that you want to make, even if it is kind of struggling to make them in a way, because it's more satisfying to have gone through hell to make something that you're proud of, and that's just the way it is. I'd much rather have more money to do stuff, but not ridiculous amounts, just a comfortable amount. That would be nice.
Mm-hmm. No, but The Lair, talking about the B movie, it's a perfect B movie, and I love the monsters. How was your work with making the monsters with the monster guy in The Lair, the design?
Well, as with all practical things, it comes down to great design and function and getting the right people in the suit. That's a massive deal. If you get the wrong person in the suit, that doesn't work so well. But if you
call the dancers of Dog Soldiers? No. Okay.
No way. Not coming back. So no, we had a great team out there who put this is all in Budapest. It was a local company who created our creatures, and I don't know how many it read in. When you watch the movie, it seems like there's a lot more, but we only had one hero creature suit and one spare. And toward the end of the film, we were able to sort of put them both on the screen at the same time and do some tricks to make it look like there's a lot more of them, some hidden cuts and things like that. But I mean, it's always a little bit of a struggle, but thankfully it was a great team, great design, and a lot of passion and enthusiasm for doing it. I think it's always getting the right team, no matter what you're doing, be it your director of photography or your production designer or your creatures or your costumes, people who are just really passionate about making movies coming together, and then you create this wonderful little family, and everybody just mucks in and gets their hands dirty, and it's great. It's satisfying.
Mm-hmm. These two movies, The Reckoning and The Lair, has in common that Charlotte Kirk, who is an actress and is in the scripts too. And I think it's like a new kind of Sigourney Weaver, Are you working with her in this relation of making a new heroine, a new like Mila Jovovich in
Resident Evil? I wouldn't mind, if we can create a sort of British action
star.
heroine, yeah, why not?
Like a Jason Statham, but as a girl.
Sure. Definitely.
Her kicks, are good, their fist.
Yeah, well, you see it in the film that we've just shot as well, that she plays this kind of East End girl who's like, she boxes and she punches people in the face, and so it's definitely creating some kind of an action
how
icon
can
there.
Advance of the Duchess is called, not the new movie?
Duchess.
It's Duchess. It was made in the Canary Islands, no?
Yeah, in Tenerife, yeah.
Can you tell us something about that movie? It's an action movie.
It's a gangster movie.
Mm-hmm.
A female-led gangster movie with lots of brutal violence in it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay,
so.
I like it. I will.
A B movie. That's what it is. It's a B movie. There you go. It's a B movie gangster movie.
And in a very good podcast called Best Movies Never Made.
Yes.
You talk about a lot of crazy projects that never get made. And I want that if you can explain your favorites to us, your movies that are still there that you want to do in the future.
Well, I never want to say that. I certainly don't want to say that something's never going to get made. I always want to say that one day they will get made. But I have a number of projects. I have one project which is kind of like it's not a literal sequel to Excalibur, but it's kind of the Arthurian legend that we know. It picks up from there as to what happened after King Arthur died, and so that's a big sort of medieval fantasy epic. I've always wanted to make a film about a Yeti. I want to do a Yeti movie.
It will be great. You are a fan of the Hammer film?
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah. So I have an idea for a Yeti movie.
And can you explain us? In Himalaya, no?
No, it's about a Yeti being captured and
bring to England.
No, it's in the States, so they fly it back to the States, but unfortunately the plane crashes somewhere in the Rocky Mountains and it escapes, and it becomes like a sort of Jaws with it in a ski resort with a Yeti,
Maybe we can make a crowdfunding, because I think all the people here want to see this movie happen.
Oh, I want to see it happen as well. There's simply not enough Yeti movies out there.
No. This guy, it reminds me a little bit of a Spanish movie called Horror Express.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah. I watched that as a child. I remember that one very, very.
Do you like it, that movie?
Well, it scared the shit out of me. I was only like
yes.
7.
It's very good. And you are aware of Spanish films, horror films?
Probably not.
Do you like it or?
Not as much as I should be, but yes. I know that we have some heroes in the back
yes,
room there.
Yes, Paco Plaza is a big fan of you. And Bayona, oof.
But yes.
Spanish royalty of horror.
I know. I feel honored that they're hanging at the back.
And good guys too.
I thought they were going to hit me with some hard questions. Yeah. So I'd say not as much as I should be, but I'm aware. A lot of it through Sitges and how awesome Sitges is.
Mm-hmm. Maybe you can close some deal, no?
Sí.
¿Os apetece preguntar algo ya o no? ¿Os animáis? ¿Sí? ¿Queréis preguntar? Ahora es el momento. Son questions for the people. ¿Tenemos un micro? Que tenemos estos 10 minutillos, ¿no? Algo así. No os cortéis, que es Neil Marshall. Majísimo.
Hello, hi Neil. From the first, I'm a big fan of your work. I still have Nightmare with the Descent. It's incredibly, that movie has an incredibly big impact in my career and what we do with my partner. We are from Colombia, and I was wondering if you have seen any Latin horror movies, if you have seen anything, if you have heard about a movement in Colombia that is called Gótico Tropical, Tropical Gothic, that is about vampires and kind of bloody movies that I hear that you like, but in Latin America. I think you would like it, and if you have seen, it could be great if you tell the name of the movie that you have seen.
I haven't seen nearly enough Colombian horror. I need to see more. So if there's good stuff out there, I always take a good recommendation, definitely. I know that a lot of productions have been shot out there, but they're not necessarily Colombian films. I know it's, I'm trying to think, there was a couple of things. Was it Mayhem or something like that? That's shot out in Colombia, but...
There is one movie in the festival that is the Páramo.
Yeah.
Very good.
Very good movie. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I'll check it out. Thanks for the recommendation.
And it's
That's what these festivals are so great for, is like getting to discover films that you like I might never normally catch up with, and that's why I love coming to these festivals. So
and
yes.
El Páramo is a peli with soldiers trapped in a place.
Oh, Soldiers Trapped.
Yes, soldiers. You like it, soldiers.
There we go. Yeah.
You like it, soldiers, but
Right up my street.
all get killed in your movies, the soldiers.
Yeah.
Maybe something like that.
Well, you got to have people getting killed.
¿Más preguntas? Aprovechar.
Yo quería saber su opinión sobre la secuela de The Descent, si le gustan en general las secuelas, que en el género pues es muy típico que se haga secuelas de peli de éxito, y si tuviera la oportunidad, si a él le gustaría hacer alguna secuela de alguna de las suyas, de Dog Soldiers, de Descent, ¿no? Que ya la hay, de Doomsday o algo así, no sé. Gracias.
He wants to know about your opinion on sequels, and especially about a sequel from The Descent, and if there could be the opportunity to have a sequel from Dog Soldiers or from another movie from yours.
I love a good sequel if it's a good sequel, but the Descent sequel doesn't necessarily fall into that category, unfortunately. It's, I guess I always felt that the Descent was, that's it, that's the story. There's nowhere else for it to go. And so I kind of, because they, the people who made it ultimately owned the rights to it because they'd paid for the first film, and they were kind of insistent that they wanted to do a sequel, and I said, well, look, if I can't stop you, so like if you're going to do it, then it should be a little bit more like this. And they said, well, we don't want to do it like that. We want to do it like this. And I was like, okay, well then, hands up, I can't help you there. So, it got made. It was kind of all over the shop. But mainly, one of the biggest problems with it is that it doesn't connect to the first film. It's like it doesn't match any of the endings of the first film. So I was like, well, I don't know. But it was also the mindset of their whole thing was like, well, all we need to do is get people in a cave with monsters, and the audience won't care. I'm like, if you disrespect the audience to that level, it's going to fail. You cannot, if you thought that's all the first film was about, then you've missed the point massively. So I think if you're going to do something, then you do it right, absolutely. But there's no problem with sequels, and I'd love to do a Doomsday sequel. That would be fun. It'll never happen, but do that. But there's always the possibility of a sequel to like Dog Soldiers or something like that. But I've had 20 years to think about it, so I want to make sure if I do it, I better do it right. Yeah.
Hi. I have a question. For you, what is the most important in a team work for the cinema?
Sorry, I didn't quite understand what's the question.
In a team work, in your team,
Yes.
what is the most important, the professionality?
Ooh, I don't think there's any one that's more important than the others. I think the most important thing is that the group all function together. I mean, I always say that it's no miracle that bad films get made. It's a miracle that a good film gets made, because to get so many people in tune with each other, to commit to something and put their passion into it, and to try and achieve the same vision. When you think about that, just trying to get a bunch of people to agree on one thing is hard enough. To try and get them all to like work long hours, hard hours, doing hard stuff to agree on the same vision for a film is very, very difficult. So how you manage your entire crew is vital. And it's not about screaming at people, it's about inspiring people, trying to get people inspired to come and work on the same vision. So there's no one person that stands out. It's like to say that the cinematographer is more important than the runner. They're not, because we need all of them to function as a machine. And so everybody gets treated with equal respect throughout the entire family that you build. You build this little family, and it's amazing. And the social aspect of filmmaking is a massive part of the appeal of it, that you form relationships and friendships and stuff like that. There is no one department that stands out more than any other. Although Daniel would argue that producers are really important.
Hello, I have a question. I'm wondering about casting, because one thing is the crew, but how to cast the main actors. Do you have any advice or reflections?
It's a process. Quite often, it's a really painful process, and a slow process. But I don't know. I used to, when we were making films like Dog Soldiers and things like that, in order to cast people, I was like saying, rather than come in a room and read some lines, why don't we go out to the pub and have a pint and a chat? Because I want to know who you are as a person, not whether you can read lines or not. I know that. You wouldn't be here if you can't read lines. So I'd rather get to, because I also figure that you're going to spend most of the time with the cast between takes. When they're on screen doing the thing, you're not interacting with them. The rest of it is you interacting with them as people. It's really important that you get along with them and can talk to them and vice versa. Because actors are humans too. So I mean, it's a process, and it's just like I've been incredibly fortunate in the casting that I've done on my films. I do enjoy kind of working with up-and-coming actors. A lot of the cast of Descent, it's just like never really done much before. On The Lair, we're working with some actors who'd never been in front of a camera before. I mean, it's like, but that enthusiasm is so infectious, and they're hungry. I love actors who are really hungry and fearless. That's the best kind of actors. Anybody who's become complacent and doesn't want to do stuff because it's not sure about that. That's not what you want from an actor.
Hungry and fearless in the pub.
Absolutely, hungry and fearless in the pub. Yeah.
Hey, Neil. I have a question about obviously making horror. There's a lot of obstacles, physical obstacles on set. And for example, like everybody knows, Steven Spielberg had a lot of trouble with the shark. Is there a specific story of one of your movies where you feel the most proud, or the way you were able to solve like a massive problem, or I'm sure you have many that it was something you had to like solve on set of any of your like movies, maybe the Lair or something that came up, and it was kind of like you were proud of the result?
I think, well, one pops to mind that's from The Descent, but like the whole process of filmmaking is problem solving, and you paint yourself into your own corner, and you've got to figure out how to get out of it and direct a way out of it. It's a mixture of that, but also it's like, you're up against the schedule, and you've got to figure out, well, how can I do, one setup instead of three to get and still tell the story. So you're constantly problem solving. In terms of a little practical problem that we had to deal with on The Descent was how do we, in order to achieve the claustrophobia that everybody talks about so much, was how do we get these big, because we shot it on 35mm, and like how do we get these big cameras into these little spaces and feel like you're in there, and not that we've conveniently like cut part of the cave away and stuck a camera in the side. So we had to have actors crawling through this little tunnel. I don't know how big it was like that big. And I wanted to do some kind of a tracking shot of them crawling through this tunnel without cheating in any kind of way. The camera had to be in there. And that was all part of the ethos of making that film, was that I didn't want to cheat. The camera, like a documentary, the cameraman and the camera had to be in the cave with the actors at all time, whether it meant squeezing in a corner or using a certain kind of lens. So you'd really feel constantly that you were trapped in there in the same way as the actors. So they had to crawl through this little cave, and the solution that the grips department came up with was literally that they got this very long plank of wood and they screwed the camera to the end of it and shoved it into the tunnel and then pulled it out again with the actors. And it sounds like really rudimentary, but like it worked brilliantly. Like, there was no other way to do it. And it was just like, grips department, bring, love it, sorted.
La última pregunta ya, si tenéis una más.
Sorry, yeah. I just wanted to ask, you said you have obviously multiple ideas in your head of things that you would like to do, for example, the Yeti. How do you know which one's the next project for you to try and make? How do you choose from everything that you've got in your head and you go, right, that one is the next one that I want to concentrate on?
You have multiple plates spinning all the time. You're just like constantly like, it's like a race, and you've got all these projects and they're all going along, and then something happens with one project. Maybe you get some interest in it. Maybe somebody says, I'll put some money into that one. And then the others drop away and you focus on that one from then on, and then that one goes to fruition. But yeah, you have to be kind of working on them all. I mean, the Yeti idea, I first came up with that like 7 or 8 years ago. But it's always, I still got to actually write the thing. Because I've been writing other things, other projects come along, somebody says, oh, well, if you do this, something like this, let's do that. And you go in that direction. It's just, you have no idea. Constantly corrections all the way through your career. It would be nice to be able to say, well, the year after next, I'm going to do this. That would be lovely. Never happens. But
Pues ya estamos. Pido un aplauso ya para despedir a Neil Marshall. Y gracias a todos. Thank you, Neil.
thank you. My pleasure.